Thank you very much for having me. I thought you were going to say she's not a developer, but she's cute. So anyway, however you take it, today I'll have a very invigorating talk, since it's the last one, about digital accessibility. And as it says, it's meant for all. We're going to take a look at this topic from a perspective where there will be no legislation mentioned, no fines, no fees, although be sure that they will exist. So it is what it is. Why am I here? My name is Maša and I work for Beletrina. Beletrina is actually known, a very well-known Slovenian publishing company, but we also do accessibility, digital accessibility, and that's the reason for that is our director, Mitja Čander, is a blind author, a blind writer. So from the beginning of his life, he had to deal with accessibility of computers, he had to write, he had to learn or get all the necessary things together to actually use a computer. So he had a best friend, Andrew, and Andrew actually started with digital accessibility. So he wrote, he transcribed our director's jottings on paper to computer. So in our company, we're all very well aware that different users have different user habits, use different appliances, be it everyday ergonomic mouse to something that actually enables you to use digital content. Where do I have this clicker? There we go. So why is this crucial? It's crucial for for life, basically, but here I'm going to introduce you to some head topics or groups where digital accessibility is very important. So it's meant for all. We all have different user habits, different user needs, and society is obliged to take care of all of us. Be it we are blind, we can't walk, we can't hear. Nevertheless, society's its due is to take care of all the users, to give them accessibility to any kind of content is public. Or in this case also commercial, because even though legislation in this field exists in the EU, it currently was obligatory only for the public sectors, but in 2025, the European Accessibility Act will make digital accessibility legislation a must for everyone, which brings a lot of new work areas, opens a lot of new dialogues between co-workers and between clients and providers of services and so forth. So I would like to highlight what groups of people and areas where it's really necessary and why. So first we have the users. The users are, of course, the people, the most important element that you need to get to use your web or digital contents. So we're basically, as I mentioned, it's meant for all accessibility, but it's really crucial for perhaps persons who are already elderly or persons who have disabilities or impairments, people who don't use computers and digital spheres on a daily basis, and also foreigners who are not keen on the language and so forth. So all in all, there's a really big group of users who benefit from digital accessibility. And like it or not, we're all in this group, because we don't need to be disabled to need accessible digital contents. And we'll get into that more thoroughly along the way. So I also wrote businesses. Of course, now that accessibility is like something new, but we all know it's not new. It's just been forgotten. Somewhere along the way between the 1990s and 2020, we kind of forgot that the simple is also sometimes the better, the more usable, the more perceivable, the more understandable, therefore more accessible. And even though the internet started as a relatively simple thing in terms of its accessibility for different users, perhaps the blind who use assistive technology and so forth, it's gotten really complicated. Through, be it visually, design, trends of design, what Theo was talking about earlier, this is all also has to be looked under the perspective, the lens of accessibility. So businesses who get on board with digital accessibility, with their accessible products and services, will of course have a lot of benefits. Among them, there's a higher revenue. If you have an accessible website or a digital solution, you're better visible and you have a better search optimization. Of course, you have also for these accessible digital products and services, the maintenance costs are usually lower. And of course, you get a lot of new business connections, because often you're in the role of a client as well as someone who is a client to someone else, if you know what I mean. You're like the middleman offering services, but also need to have its own services accessible. So you get a lot of new connections and, of course, new customers' loyalty. So be sure that persons with disabilities have a lot of bad experience with inaccessibility in the digital world. Of course, in the physical as well, but we'll focus now on the digital. Meaning that when they find someone who they can trust being well or suitably accessible to their needs, you will have a loyal customer. You will not only have the one person who is, let's say, the disabled person, but his family, his friends, everyone who's aware of different needs of persons with different, physical impairments or be whatever. So this is also very important, customer loyalty. And also they spread the word, the disabled and the communities are really face-to-face, man-to-man, and that's also how good recommendations and the good renommé travels before you. And also, of course, you get a lot of new knowledge and skills, be it you're a developer, project manager, someone who communicates with or tests with different user experiences. That's also a big new field for you to encompass into your existing work most of the time. And also, it's also connected and important for society, for the development, for the empathic development of society, where we include vulnerable groups, as we call them. But let me tell you why I put the apostrophes, because these are not vulnerable groups. Before these conferences and these talks and this legislation ever happened, disabled people were already using the internet. And it's amazing how, when you actually are sitting with someone who has a disability, for instance, a blind person, and they're doing like this, and the screen reader is reading, underline, underline, and he knows everything, and he's just clacking away. And I'm talking about a real person, Tony, our tester of analytics, our accessibility tester, who is testing for the blind users. It's very particular use of websites, of digital contents. So he's blind, and of course you have a lot of different users, even between one disability. So you have blind from birth and people who just got blind from, be it accidents or some medical situations. So you have a lot of different logics behind this vulnerability, which is really not vulnerability, since they're already doing what they want to do and trying to be as independent in using digital contents as they possibly can, using the 0.03 of site they have left to identify, was this opened in a new window, or am I just still here where nothing is going on? Because the alternative text didn't tell him that the content he's looking for is opened in another tab next to the one he's in. Anyway, that's why for society it's important to raise our awareness, to raise our social empathy, to not see people who have different user habits and needs as someone who is vulnerable. Society is made so that we take care of our small groups, not exclude them. So that's why it's important for society. Also, we've seen that some extreme society situations can really limit our real life activities, such as the COVID quarantine and so forth, where we actually, it was a good thing that COVID happened, because of course it was a bad thing, but a good thing that made us aware of a lot of things. For one, how important it is to have accessible digital information. When's the doctor working? When's this open? Can I go there? How can I go there? Libraries, for instance, this was all, informationally inaccessible to persons with disabilities if the websites themselves were inaccessible. So a big gap between users and people in one society. And of course, it's very important for the future, for the digital revolution we're living in and working in, and this is the digital revolution being that physical accessibility and digital accessibility are intertwined, are getting intertwined really quickly and really thoroughly, and soon we won't know where the digital ends and the physical begins. For instance, think about tourism. More and more services and different products can be available online if they're accessible. So you can enable people with disabilities to be more independent if you think about accessibility in different areas of life, but digital accessibility, very important. Also very digital accessibility and AI, a lot of potential for cognitive impairments, for persons with cognitive impairments, and also for people with visual impairments, because it can describe like graphic elements and so forth. So a lot of potential in future developments. And I don't want to be blunt about it, but here, you know, why digital accessibility is crucial for the future of each and every one of us. Because, as I said, not to be blunt, but we're all going to get old, and we're going to have certain disabilities or impairments we're going to have to face, and we will see firsthand how important digital accessibility is for us as people. For a little bit focus on users. I know that developers and so forth, I've heard a lot of people develop websites being interested in making them accessible, but don't have the opportunity to see persons with different disabilities use computers. For instance, the blind, people who are blind use assistive technology. In their case, assistive technology is a screen reader, which is a program installed in the computer and then reads actually from the HTML code, but not everything. So he really gets a lot of data, and everything's read. You know how the data of a file in a graphic file is named. So he gets really a lot of information, more than we do only by looking at the website. But then again, he's limited elsewhere. So, I mean, the blind user. So besides this screen reader, who is actually a voiceover of everything that he looks at on a website, he also uses a braille line, which is this little piano-looking thingy here. This actually works. So this braille line is connected to the screen reader, so it gets the same information as the screen reader and the user by hearing them. And it usually, the little buttons you see, it's how letters are going in, and he's reading them with his fingers when they pop up. So you can see that in the braille writing, he can read here on a braille or on a digital braille line everything that the screen reader is telling him, but it's limited to, let's say, the maximum amount of 40 signs per line. So here is less than 40 signs. So it's important. Users are important to make accessible websites or apps. Why? Because they can show you how they use it, and when they can't use it, you see it's inaccessible to them. And they are not some experts. Users shouldn't be experts in accessibility in order to make really accessible content for them. They just have to show you their natural way of using it, of using a certain website or something. So you have to know what you give them to test, what is important for certain groups. For instance, it's important for people who are visually impaired, that they perhaps have textual alternatives available for anything that's not textual, basically for all the graphic elements, pictures, photos, to make it equally available, accessible to them. So we do a lot of testing. We have a standard group of people since 2013 when we opened this sector for accessibility. And then we started the first projects for analyzing this accessibility of websites in the cultural sphere. And this is our blind guy, Tony. So if I speak about them, don't think I'm speaking about them like that I don't respect them. We're just buddies and I have no filter. So yeah, and I wanted to just show you more plastically. See, he's using the braille. You see, this guy is holding a mouse. Blind people don't use mouse. And he's actually reading on his little braille. Yeah, see here, the braille. And that's how the testing goes. So you basically, first time, for first couple of years, we just sat with them and talked with them and spoke how they use websites and so forth. But the blind usually are very independent in life. Tony, one taxi man, said when he was looking at him, he was like going at home. He didn't have a stick, nothing. He just went and he said, "This is a genius." But I want to say that they're really independent and capable, living a full life. And that's why it's such a shame that we kind of don't think about them as well, and users who have these kinds of user habits. So also it's important that we make websites and digital products compatible, robust enough that they are compatible with certain digital tools that certain groups of users use so that they can access content. I just wanted to show you this so you can more plastically imagine what this means. So he also uses a talking watch. The phone also has a voiceover over everything. So these providers, big providers of phones and such services have really made a step forward in including voiceover or voice recognition for these tools. So as far as accessibility goes, as far as digital accessibility goes, any digital content can be accessible as long as the user has at least one part of their body that they can control. There's a whole range of assistive technologies from keyboards to mouth appliances to, he only had the left and the right cheek, I think, that he could control. And then he had these little pads and he was like, ding, ding, and then computer was on and he was going. And this demonstrates another very important thing. Everybody wants to be independent on the internet. Even if you need a stick in your mouth, do it. Would rather have that than someone sitting next to me doing everything for me. So these are Thea said, mother strategy. Everybody wants to be independent on the net, even if with just a stick in their mouth. But if that means independency, go for it. So it's really important. But as you can see, you have a lot of different gadgets available for users. But keep in mind, this is very expensive. At least in Slovenia, still, Uri Soča is really doing a great job with this, but these are expensive tools. So it's better to really work on accessibility of things that can be accessible, such as websites and applications, and develop accessible content. Also, these guys are very, very interesting users. So these are the deaf and people who are deaf and have hearing impairments, hard of hearing. Their mother language is sign language, so they don't have the logic of reading the words. So if you think of a word, close your eyes, you see it in letters. And deaf people don't do that. They see it in gestures. So we have, for every nationality that has its own language, there's its own sign language, so Slovenian Sign Language, German Sign Language, and so forth, but also a universal, let's say, worldwide or worldly, like one exists, so main words are, they can all understand the European, like Esperanto is a language of, mixed. Sign language also exists for international sign language. Sorry, couldn't find the word. And these users are very visual, and they won't go reading something unless they have to. So their text alternative, if you want, is sign language interpretation of everything that's written. Also, we have sign language interpreters in any video contents for every voice content or audio content. And because this is their language, this is their writing, this is how they communicate, and this is the thing that they are most eloquent in. It's like their inner thing. Of course, they go to school, they learn, this is the alphabet for the blind, for deaf, and they go to school, and they actually learning is quite hard for deaf people because, again, sign language is not the same as written spoken language. It's has much less vocabulary. So a person who communicates in sign language has the capacity, the literal capacity, let's say, or literacy capacity, somewhere in the field of 7th to 8th grade of primary school. That's how much more narrow the vocabulary of sign language is. So you don't directly translate what I'm speaking to with words. It's like compressing what I say, saying it to different words, you know, it's not direct translation. That's what I said, that's why I'm telling you it's different for them to imagine words, produce words, but they do. I mean, we had a project of accessibility topic. We had a project where we enabled them to be independent literary authors. But the only difference was that their literature was created in their sign language, so gestured, filmed, and then with the help of an interpreter, we put it to text. And that's their way of creating, right, or thinking, if you want. So it's really important to know that, and the other thing is, as I said, they're very visual. They react to color, picture, infographics, for instance, very good for deaf people as like their sort of logics of understanding. But we have to know that persons with disabilities, like with the persons with the status of disabled people, they have. They used to be very segregated with their organizations, with their local, societies, and they were more closed. Since the logic was, let's keep them here where they're safe and we know how to take care of them. But now the logic is completely reversed. Deaf young people, bless you. Deaf people and also blind people go with their assistants to normal schools. They're integrated from a very early age, and they don't really depend that much on sign language because they do read more, but it's much more difficult for them. And if we encompass all the people who actually are not perhaps deaf, but only very hard of hearing, then that's a really larger group who needs also textual text alternative, which is subtitles, basically. So that's all. These two techniques are really important for enabling accessibility for them. And then the last, but not least, in fact, the largest group of users with impairments or disabilities are users with cognitive disabilities. That's the largest and also one of the unseen groups of disabilities that really need care. We need to take care of also their user habits and needs while thinking about accessibility and thinking about how to make some product or service accessible. Cognitive impairments can be the result of an accident. A lot of situations can lead up to having cognitive impairments, and even if just impairments because of birth issues and so forth, or anesthesia, and a lot of conditions are really difficult. For instance, do you know what aphasia is? Aphasia. You're nodding, great. A lot of people don't know that that's actually a condition where you cannot read anymore. I know a person we do a lot of cooperation with the Society of Persons with after head injuries, and I'm talking about heavy head injuries. And one person has aphasia, meaning I think even the president of this society. So he had an accident, I think it was a car accident, severe head injury, he can't read anymore. He read normally before the accident, and now he looks at the letters, he can't read. Can you imagine? That's called aphasia. For instance, I'm saying that we're not just talking about a static group of people, and I'm also trying to explain that it's really, you can't really expect anything like that, but when such a person goes and sits behind the computer, you will see the difference. Their concentration will be much lower than persons with non-head injuries, for instance. A lot of people get headaches after 20 minutes. again, their concentration can be broken. So if they're filling out a form, a digital form, and if you put the guidelines of how to fill this form, what goes in this field and the next field and so forth, if you put this inside the field, it's not okay. Because our tester, Alida, for instance, she's 61, she's also a bit old and very active and blah, blah, blah. And she does, I don't know, she writes in the field Alida, and then she gets a phone call, she's an hour and a half on the phone, and then she goes back to the computer and says, why did I write Alida? What am I supposed to write in here? Because once you write something in the field, the guideline where it says right here your name and surname is gone. You know what I mean? And if you keep it above the field where the user has to write in an information, then it's still with them once they come back from this 1 hour and a half long phone call. And then she would know. For instance, also it's very important to everything to keep predictable. Predictability is a very big thing of accessible content. If, for instance, you have this, again, you have a form, and Alida, our tester for cognitive disabilities, is testing this, and she puts everything in, and then the button, it says send. And she's like, what? It's a pause, because it's not partially. It's not in the language of that is expected, that is predicted. And I'm telling you, I know, it looks like, come on, really, this bothers you, but it's not only that bothers her, she's like, oh shit, I don't understand. Oh my God, I don't know if I can use this. I probably did something wrong. Yeah, I'm not gonna do this form now. It's okay, I'm closing the computer. That's what happens. And she's never going back to that form again because it said send. For instance, a really small thing can have a really big impact, and it causes for the user to feel bad about themselves, not blaming the inaccessibility, but blaming their, whatever, their fault. So we don't want that. Okay, what exactly are these accessible digital products and services? So what I wrote is, if you think accessibility first, you do accessibility well. Because don't think about accessibility where everything else is already done, because that's going to be a problem. Because going back, fixing everything, or making stuff that you didn't make as accessible, that will take additional time, additional money, and additional stress, not to mention that you perhaps won't even be able to change or make everything you want to hindsight accessible. So I really want to put this on your heart. So choose accessible templates. I know that Silver Stripe is they have, and it's really clearly marked which are accessible, what exactly is made accessible, how they thought about accessibility while branding certain templates as accessible and others not. So really try to choose the templates that feature accessibility. Also important, both websites or applications, you should really get to know WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Those are the guidelines that are standard, that are worldwide, and that should be taken into consideration and followed if you want to make digital content accessible. On the W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium. MIT and all those big players are there. They're actually, setting the game since 2016 and even earlier, but that's 2016 is when W3C put out the directive to Europe, and Europe had a accessibility directive. Now they have the European Accessibility Act. So this is all kind of governed from the backs of this Worldwide Web Consortium. What I want to tell you is go to their website. They have really, really good intro into accessibility for different groups like developers, project managers, designers. You don't have to listen to the things you don't want to listen to because it's not your area. And then they also have very good examples of how you should not do it, why you should not do it like this, and how you should do it. Like really everything black and white, and that's really very helpful. They also have a bunch of awareness raising things and really interesting data about users and so forth. So it's really a good motivation because as you will find out, it gets worse before it gets better. When you start to deal with accessibility in your own business, use good contrasts for colors. Don't put gray on gray. It looks pretty to some people, but you can't really read it. And use clear fonts. Don't use some wiggity, we don't know if it's a small or big letter, what is it? It just needs to be readable first. So you don't have to use Arial or some boring Times New Romans or whatever kind of font you want, or you have to buy them or make them. Just search again for the accessible templates. There is a font used for persons who have dyslexia. So it's really looks like Arial, but it's fatter on the lower side of a letter. So it's like a B with a really fat standing, like really fat legs. So this actually grounds the letter in one line for persons with reading impairments or like people who have dyslexia, because otherwise letters are jumping for them, and it's really hard to keep them still. So one other thing, like little tips for dyslexics and for easier to read text, use only left alignment, not like alignment of text on both sides. Don't do that, because then the spaces between the words are unequal, and that also makes it harder to read for persons with dyslexia. And again, dyslexia is a spectrum, so I think I have dyslexia too. Anyway, accessibility expert consultancy before starting production. So, okay, you chose an accessible template, you know the VCAG, you've browsed through all the websites you need, you decided on colors that are like the basic colors of it, the CGP and everything, and the font, and then it's good to contact an accessibility expert. Either you already have one in your company, or you can, search the web in your area and you'll probably find someone like me or someone else. These people, it's good for an expert just to make the check of what you've chosen, if this stands, because it's good, because you really, if you're even more so if you're at the beginning of this phase of enrolling accessibility full on in your company, it's always good to have a second opinion that would confirm or perhaps find an unexpected error in your plan, and you can get rid of that error before actually putting down anything, starting developing anything, right? So what is also important, and Innovative knows this is interim user testing. Testing with users. So you have to, it's great if you can connect with a group of experts or an organization that offers user testing. Those are usually organizations for persons with disabilities, but also, for instance, like Beletrina, or there in Slovenia I also have Zavod za digitalno dostopnost, A11Y, that also does accessibility. So you should not just count on yourself. You should go for advice, at least in the beginning. And that will, and also find people who are ready to test this for you, or go to some experts that already know how to do these testings with users, and you'll have a very good base information on, and really good chance of making an accessible website. Also, you can check accessibility yourselves. While doing that, Wave is a tool where you just put in the link, and it's really, I like the Wave tool for checking accessibility because it gives you detailed report, and also every mistake, there's a question of why is this a mistake, and how can I get rid of this mistake or correct this mistake? So it's a really full service kind of a checker. And also you have contrast checker to make good contrasts. And VCAG actually gives you an exact ratio for contrasts. And of course you should communicate with your client, because clients are usually the ones who don't know nothing. And it's good that you will be the one who will give them the right information, who will show your awareness of the of the topic and spread this awareness onto them, because even if they are legislative, if they're bound with the legislative, it's really difficult because they usually don't know this, that there's a law about this. So you should really communicate with them. A couple of fun facts. At least 1 billion people, or 15% of the world's population, has a recognized disability. As the population ages, many more people acquire disability, and yet they do not identify as someone who has an impairment or disability. Therefore, they will not identify as someone who would need accessibility, which is like, you're blind to your own needs. And very interesting data is that in countries with a life expectancy over 70 years, which is EU plus, America and so forth, people spend around 11% of their lifespan living with at least one of these disabilities that we've mentioned. So it's about 7-8 years. If you reach 70, out of those 70, you'll have like 10% with a disability when you're older. And then also an interesting information is that globally there is a market of persons with disability. They have some revenue power. In England, Great Britain, I think that's called the purple pound. That's actually what is brought in the economy by persons with disabilities. And yeah, as you can see, a lot of people control a lot of disposable income. And this is where accessibility again comes in, with offering accessible products, accessible services, and getting something in return. Now, the 4 principles are really basic. What you need to make it accessible is every user has to be able to perceive information and the user interface. I've written here this is from VCAG, so you'll have this available, but every principle has underneath the certain amount of VCAG guidelines that are actually divided into 4 principles. So it has to be perceivable, it has to be operable, it has to be understandable, and it has to be robust. And this robustness applies to what I was mentioning before, that persons with different technology support, even if they use a Braille line that's 20 years old on a website that's been launched yesterday, it has to work. That meaning must be robust enough to work on an old screen reader or Braille. So, as I said, if you want to implement digital accessibility into your business, you should make good work reorganization, not just, throw this to someone and say, you have to do this additionally from now on. Boom. No, it's really because people are really reluctant to change, but that's nothing new. So testing with users with various disabilities, you should connect with organizations who can help you with that. Also connect with digital experts. And you can start, of course, producing accessible websites and mobile applications from scratch, or you can also enable better accessibility on already existing digital products and services you already have with different clients. A couple of just real quick, few interesting things. These are a few cases about accessibility. For instance, in the field of like driving innovation of a company, Apple had a case where the California State University couldn't use a system of educational system of Apple's iTunes U because it was only working on Apple, and then Apple decided to make this functionality also compatible with every other system, so Windows and Mac, and then they all could use it. Because firstly, the Apple's iTunes U was not accessible to blind people who more rarely used Apple than Mac. And also all the voiceovers of iPhone has already gone into general use. I think it's Alexa, right? Is it Alexa? Siri, sorry. So even Siri is a product of voiceover accessibility solutions, and everybody uses it. So Yeah, also Google, for instance, Google has a bunch of functionalities who were done for better accessibility, but now are used by all of us, I would dare say. It's like autocomplete, for instance. Then again, there was also a case with Target, Target.com. I'm sure you've heard about it. Just 2 more minutes. Target had an inaccessible web store, and then the National Federation of the Blind sued Target for that, and then Target got a bunch of money to pay as a fine, and then, but they decided that instead of being the rebels, they will cooperate. They started to cooperate with the National Federation of the Blind, and in a couple of years, they became the leading web store, being the most accessible, also recognized with a high certification from the before enemy Federation of the Blind. So that's how also success stories are born from cooperating with users. And one of the earliest cases was when a blind guy in Australia sued the Olympics, Sydney Olympics 2000, because they had an inaccessible website for him, that he couldn't see results, he couldn't see predictions and so forth. And then it was that they had a hearing before the Human Rights and Equal Opportunities Commission, and the commission said that you have to do everything you have to do. If you don't do it, we will not support the Olympics, the event. And in a really short time, they had to give it all they could, and they made the features that were necessary to make accessible. Everything turned out well. The Olympic Games were not in danger anymore. But then again, the Australia government was one of the first to adapt, already in the 2000s, to adapt the VCAG and all these guideline standards. And also subsequently, Commonwealth government required all the agency websites to pass accessibility in December 2000. That's 18 years before legislation of accessibility came in European Union. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Maša. Any questions for Maša? All right. Oh, a lot of questions, actually. All right, coming.
Thank you for that talk. On one of your slides, it said, don't use plugins. Could you elaborate on that?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, don't use plugins. Why? Because reason number one, there's a really good article for people from Slovenia, Zavod Enajst Y. It has a great article on why not plugins. But to make the long story short, WCAG, so the guidelines, exist for exactly the purpose of not needing anything else. So you follow the guidelines, you can make everything accessible without any plugins. Second, very important reason, people who need what the plugin is supposed to offer, so different contrast, this different font, I don't know, underlining some links and whatever, don't nobody use that who really needs that. You know, if I'm blind, I'm gonna have my own assistive technology that I can use on every single page. I will not rely that this page I'm going to see will have the plugin that will offer me exactly the contrast I need. I will have my own technology that enables me to see the contrast I have on all the pages. That's number two. Number three, plugins can interfere with screen readers. Plugins can actually offer less accessible options than they really are. For instance, I mean, this plugin costs about like €1,000 to put on, and then you're done. And this, you're thinking you're done. It's a commercial thing. Nobody needs it. It can only make bigger interferences for users with assistive technology because not compatible in robustness sort of way. Plus, it also makes it sometimes harder to analyze the other content because the plugin just blocks everything, all the analyzing tools. So in short.
So these are plugins for your CMS or something to augment?
No. Like on a website, you see a little icon of like a person like that, and then you click that. That's a plugin that offers you options of a different font or a different contrast color. And I'm saying that these options can often be worse. So, okay.
All right. Yeah. Continuing.
Do you believe that the new legislation will actually finally get the point across that something has to change?
No. That's why I'm here today, because legislation has existed now for over 5 years, and I think that the public sector doesn't have the right motivation to be the leader of this change, and that's why I'm here. Understand that you are the private sector, you can find better motivation, and you know how public work is. So, thanks.
Thanks. One more question?
Yes. Thanks for the interesting talk. I have a similar question to Johannes. Because I had the situation where we are using a form and we use the date picker, and the date picker looks quite shitty. So, but as you say, if I use a plugin or something which makes a nice date picker, it may be not accessible for other people who have different readers, whatever. What's the best practice for that?
Yeah, maybe I was unclear. What I was saying no to is the plugin for accessibility. Okay. What I've been talking what I've been saying. But any other plugin should be at least tested with a screen reader so that you know that it's compatible with the users with technology, with the supportive technology. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's something that I would highly recommend and should be done, so you know that it's accessible in the way that it's compatible with a screen reader and so forth, with a braille, so that the blind user can use it equally as anyone else. But as I was saying, the plugins that are supposed to enable accessibility to different sort of users, those I say no to.
Okay. What I also mean is, would it be better to detect, okay, we have a visitor who has accessibility enabled, so that I don't override the default date picker and let the visitor decide? Is this best practice, or
no?
Don't differentiate?
I think everything is best accessible if it's placed directly on the site.
Okay.
So that's rule number one. Don't for instance, you can have a video, just like plastic. You can have a video, and then there's things going on in the video, and you can have someone that's a practice for blind people and movies. So how do blind viewers know what the movie looks like? So in between dialogues, there's a person who is trained to describe the scenery. It's raining, it's like this, blah, blah, blah. He's wearing that, she's wearing this. And then you hear the dialogue, and then you get a full picture of the movie. Same here. If you put it all on the website, in the website language and sorts of, then you will have the way it's supposed to be, as this movie, as I just described. But if you, for instance, have this movie, but next to it is an attachment of a Word document that describes in text everything that's going on in the movie, it's not the same, but you still have the textual alternatives, so on paper it goes. But user experience show that, and best sort of experience models show that it's just best to use it all together. Okay. So keep it inside one page.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thanks.
All right. Anyone else?
No.
Yep. What? A few online questions?
No, not questions.
Question? Recommendations. Maybe Maša can read them?
For the later.
Later if you check the Conviva chat, you'll see recommendations online for
accessibility.
For few people, accessibility. People suggested ideas and different apps, as I understand. Was it apps too? Links and everything. So check the chat for Conviva. Yeah. Big round of applause for Maša.